Today's social media segment is brought to you by Terrebonne General Health System. Your health is our legacy. Rouse's, you're either local or you're not. Buick, the craft of modern luxury. St. Martin and Bork, know your rights. All right, it's that time again. Good vibes time. I'm Martin Foss along with the illustrious Debbie Cox-DeNova. How are you?
I like that. Good. How
Yeah,
are
you like that? The illustrious.
Yeah.
Try to come up with a different adjective.
I love it.
All right, so deciphering intuition from fear. Is this common?
This is a common question, or it's rather a question that a lot of people don't even know they have to ask themselves.
Yeah.
In my line of work, what I help my clients to do is to help tap into their own guidance system so that they're guiding their life from an intuitive place. However, a lot of times clients will come to me and say, well, my intuition just told me not to do this or to do this. And when we unpack it, what we find is it's not intuition at all. It's either trauma, their anxiety, some sort of fear. And it can be very difficult in the very beginning to understand which is guiding me here. Am I being led by my trauma, or is this my intuitive voice? So I would like to talk about that today. So if you at home are having the same issue, it's kind of like, I'm not sure what's going on here.
That's a
you can
good
learn.
point, because I know a lot of people that don't invest in things because their gut told them not to do it. But their gut's been controlling them for 50 years. They never take a chance because their gut tells them not to. But sometimes I say, well, throw the gut away and get a piece of paper out and write things down.
Yeah.
So the gut can mess a lot of things up.
Well, yes, especially when there's trauma, right? So if you've experienced, let me give an example. Okay, so you're walking along in the dark at night and all of a sudden you hear footsteps coming up behind you, right? And it ends up being a mugger. They hold you at gunpoint, they take everything that you have, they run away. It's a very traumatic experience. So a few weeks later, you're walking again in the dark and you hear footsteps coming up behind you. And there's a feeling in your gut, this is a mugger, right? And you turn around to find a little old lady kind of teetering along. So that feeling right there was not your intuition, but it was trauma from something that happened to you before. And your gut can actually hold trauma from your past. And a lot of that trauma originated when we were kids, before we even had the reasoning ability, right? So it's very traumatic. And then we're operating out of that. So, or for example, and this might be a very common one, it's like, I found the love of my life. My intuition just tells me that this is my person, my soulmate, right? And then a few weeks later, this person's a narcissist, right? So it's like, in the beginning, was that really your intuition, or was it something else? And so that it's really important to be able to decipher between those two things. Sometimes you can meet somebody and you're like, I just have an off feeling about them. There's something that they do, a way that they say things, I don't like it.
That's when you follow your gut.
Well, sometimes, but sometimes you've made an association to someone who has harmed you in the past. And because this person reminds you of that person from the past, and again, this could be a very subconscious thing, you're pushing away from them or attributing traits to them that actually don't belong to them.
Right.
So it's real important to be able to decipher what's happening here, take a pause, so that you're not running your life by your trauma or your fears or your anxieties, okay? So what we're talking about when we talk about intuition, and we did a show on this before, it's a heart phenomenon. And I don't even know if you remember the study from the Heart Math Institute where they took 25 participants in, right? You remember they went through a process that brought them to what we call heart coherence. And really what we're talking about is just an optimal rhythm of the heart. So it's a breathing process. You close your eyes, put your hands on your heart, and you actually bring your heart to a regulated, optimal rhythm. Then they hooked them up to rigorous testing. They wanted to measure skin conductivity. They wanted to measure heart variability, so EEGs, ECGs, and they put them in front of monitors. And the computers were programmed to randomly select and show images that would either elicit a stimulating effect or a calming effect, okay? And they measured before and during the exposure of these images. And what they found was that even before the computer had selected the image, and this is very important, even before the computer had selected the image, right before both the brain and the heart had a response that it was appropriate to the image that was about to be shown, but the heart had the first response. And so this is a very mysterious sort of thing. How does the heart know? We know that the heart has a bigger electromagnetic field than any other organ of the body.
Right.
We know that it has 40,000 neurons and it's sending more signals to the brain than vice versa. So sometimes when we just know something and we're not sure how we know it, there is some sort of mysterious phenomenon at play. A lot of people have, they
Well,
they
that's why I said when
speculate.
somebody walks in the room, they catches someone, they said, my heart skipped a beat. It might really have done that.
It might have, and that's very interesting that you should say that, because what they have found in these studies is that when your intuition hits in that moment, your heart actually does change rhythms. So they'll do a little flutter thing. And the people who are the most in tune with their heart and the changes of the rhythms they actually measured higher in intuition in these tests. So being able to really sit with what your heart is doing and how you feel is really important. I'm going to give you some tips on how to understand whether you're perceiving intuition or if it's your fear at place. But the main thing to really understand is that the heart is what we're talking about here. You do have those three brains, right? The one in your head, the one in your gut. We're talking about the one that is the master organ that is interpreting the world a nanosecond before your brain
talking
does.
about guys. It's got to be said sometimes.
Yes.
And like Gloria Estefan said as we go to the break, the rhythm is going to get you.
Yeah, the rhythm's going to get you.
All right. So we'll take a short break. When we come back, the illustrious Debbie Cox DeNova. She continues the talk of deciphering intuition from fear. We'll be right back. Today's social media segment is brought to you by South Louisiana Bank. It's better when we bank together. Waits and Downer, attorneys at law. Terrebonne Ford, built Ford tough. All right, we are back with Debbie Cox DeNova, and we're talking about deciphering intuition from fear. And I was thinking during the break, you may have a brilliant idea, but you talk yourself out of it because you allow the fear to be the CEO, the chairman of the board, the president, and everything else. When, if you just take a deep breath, step back and go, what am I scared of? Sometimes you can put everything in order and then move forward.
Yeah. And this is a really important thing that you're bringing up, because one of the attributes of intuition is that it is emotionally neutral in the moment that it hits. Okay. So that is a very tough thing for people to understand, because a lot of people equate their emotions with their intuition, right? Oh, I was just drawn in. And so, but the emotions, just like the thoughts of the mind, are not to be trusted all the time. You know, sometimes your emotions lead you into very toxic relationships or get you to run away from a little old lady in a dark alley. So emotions are not what we're talking about. In the moment intuition happens, it's actually an emotionally neutral experience. Now, emotions do follow because the mind doesn't like change, right? So to your point, if your intuition is guiding you to do something that is going to next level your life in some kind of way, what often happens is that comes in this momentary emotional knowing, and then what follows is your mind starts to pedal backwards and go, wait, well, what about this? And well, maybe we could do it later, and that sort of thing. And then emotion does follow. So emotion is involved at some point in time, but in that very moment, it's actually emotionally neutral. Now, here's a way to know whether or not your intuition is guiding you forward or moving you back. So if you are having a hard time right now making a decision about something, whether it's work or whatever it is, I want you to close your eyes, and this comes from Marie Forleo. close your eyes, and I want you to imagine yourself at the crossroads where you are deciding yes or no, okay? And so decide yes in your mind, and then in that nanosecond that you imagine yourself going down the path of yes, I want you to feel into your body. And is there an expansion or a contraction? So sometimes when I say that to clients, they're like, what does that mean, right? Well, expansion is literally like, it feels like you're opening up. So again, you gotta be perceptive in that little nanosecond. Yeah. Is your body sort of opening up and leaning in? Is there excitement? Is there joy? Is there upliftment? That's expansion. Conversely, contraction would look like a folding away, right? Like a gut punch, like a hesitation, like, ooh, right? They're kind of a crumbling feeling of moving away from.
Like, ooh, she's a serial killer.
Right. And so that's your intuition, that little second, right? Now, here's what's important to note is it's that nanosecond when it first comes in, right? Because after that knowing is when the mind starts chattering. And the mind loves to tell stories. So this is important to note. The intuition comes without language. It's just a knowing, right? And oftentimes you don't really know why you should go this way, but you just know.
The mind seems to be a party buster.
The mind is a party buster for sure. But remember, we're programmed for negativity. Negativity bias is a thing because our mind is programmed to help us to survive, right? But the mind, what it likes to do is it's very chattery, right? It'll tell you all sorts of stories. It'll spin things around. It'll create these scenarios that haven't happened yet, and it'll catastrophize. And so if you feel yourself telling a narrative and you're going down that pathway, it is likely your mind, your fear, your anxiety, and not your intuition. Your intuition is in that moment. It doesn't come often, but when it comes, it's just a knowing. I don't know how I know, but I just know, right?
You know what I find too? Maybe you can address it. When I was younger in my business years, and I had $0 in the bank.
Yeah.
I remember my dad said one time, "How much money you got in the bank?" I said, "Just got out of college, Dad, 0." He said, "Go do it." As you get older and you accumulate things, that's when the chatter starts in your mind saying, I could lose everything. Yeah. Well, you didn't have nothing when you started.
Right. Exactly. So that's one thing is like when I'm talking to my clients and they're telling me about, okay, well, it's because of this and they're starting to tell me their fear stories. We already know intuition is very, very much, it's hard. First of all, it comes in one directive at a time. So intuition doesn't lay out a whole thing for you, right? The mind does that. So intuition is kind of like the GPS. It's like turn now. You don't know why, you're just trusting. You turn now, okay? And eventually you get to the place that you're going to. Whereas the mind will go, oh, you know what? You shouldn't do this because blah, 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 blah. And it fills in this whole story that hasn't happened. And now there's fear rising and there's a stress response in the body. The intuition doesn't do that. It's a very calm knowing, even when you're coming away from danger, it's just a calm knowing to go, right? And then follows the emotion. So that's one way to know it. And the other thing to note is that you want to make sure that you are evaluating what is being said afterward, because what tends to happen is that with your fear and your anxiety, it's very judgmental. It's very mean oftentimes. It has a lot of shame and blame to lob. It tells you, again, of all these stories and the scenarios that could happen and reasons why you shouldn't do it. So if you have an inspiration to do something and it's like expansion in that moment, then the mind will come on top of it. Yeah, but blah, 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 and on it will go. Whereas with intuition, it's very calm. It's very simple. It's very clear. It's compassionate to yourself and others. So there's no shame, blame, judgment to go around. It's just a very clean energy that will pull you forward and give you one guidance step at a time versus the mind, which will just chatter along and actually drive fear and anxiety.
One of the greatest slogans as we close of all time was Nike.
Yeah.
Just do it.
Just do it. Exactly. Yeah. Yes. So, and make sure that you are understanding that even when your brain is introducing these narratives and it feels like logic, it's not logic if there's a lot of fear driving it. It's actually using the wrong part of the brain. You're in amygdala hijack. Remember that. Your prefrontal cortex is cooled off. So there's no way for you to be logical when you're in that worried, stress, anxiety loop. You need to come to center, calm yourself, bring yourself to optimal coherence, and then listen and give yourself time so you can move forward according to your intuition.
Very good. There you have it. Ask her out. We'll see you next week. Today's social media segment is brought to you by Alford and Associates for all of your insurance needs. CIS,
Cardiovascular Institute of the South, the highest quality cardiovascular care available. Barker Honda, the Barker family tradition of quality.